Welcome to the NanoCap podcast. I'm your host, Will Chernlin, and I'm excited to have you join me on this journey through the world of NanoCap companies. For the past decade, I've talked to thousands of business owners across various industries. It's been an enlightening experience revealing the vast tapestries of entrepreneurship and innovation that thrives beneath the surface of mainstream media coverage. Each week, I will interview different leaders of NanoCap publicly traded companies to learn about their history, what they do now, and their future. As a reminder, none of this information is financial advice, and it is all for entertainment purposes only. Let's start this week's episode. Hi, everyone. I'm Will Chernlin, and this is the NanoCap podcast. This week, we have Ari Kahn, the CEO of Bridgeline Digital, ticker symbol BLIN. Ari, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Will. Happy to be here.
So I want to start from the very beginning as we kind of go through this timeline. And first and foremost, the first thing that stuck out to me is that you were essentially in Eastern Europe right around when the wall fell, learning all sorts of different computer science. What were you doing there, and how'd you end up there?
Okay. Let's see. So it was 1989. I think that's the year the wall fell. And I was studying math at UPVS University in Budapest. Hungary has a huge history in mathematics, especially computer-related mathematics, discrete mathematics. A guy named Paul Erdős and other famous mathematicians kind of kicked it off. So I was there being a math nerd and having a great time because I got a Eurail pass and became a ski bum for a year and bounced around Eastern Europe back when you still had Yugoslavia, and skiing up in the Zakopane Mountains in Poland, and you had different currency in every country, run over to, Italy, Switzerland, which I couldn't afford, but I went there a couple times anyways and had a great time. So I was studying math and skiing.
And so then how did your math studies turn into AI studies?
Well, all right. So I was at Kalamazoo College, and I think they didn't even have a computer science major at the time. It was math, but I was very good at math. I loved math, and I was doing that, and I was also doing computers ever since I was in middle school. In fact, I was writing computer programs and selling them, and then from there went off to Hungary, hardcore mathematics, really crazy stuff. And before I even graduated from Kalamazoo, University of Chicago reached out, and the Office of Naval Research did, and said, hey, come on over. You can get a PhD for free, and we'll give you a couple $1,000s a month to live on. You don't need a bachelor's degree. You've done some good stuff over in Hungary. And a guy named Lassi Belbai was in Hungary and at University of Chicago. So I jumped ship and did a PhD, and they had a pretty cool AI program. And computer vision, AI computer vision requires very serious math background. So I kind of naturally gravitated towards that. But I was building, we ended up working on the guidance systems for the Tomahawk, and even took a little time over to Hughes Research Lab. Raytheon had the contract for the Tomahawk, but we were doing stuff over there as well, and doing guidance, and then went off and started a software company and watched AI do amazing things in the last 20 years as I was focusing on MarTech, really marketing technology.
So when you're at a very high level of math, if you're going from undergrad to skipping that to go to PhD, it's just there's so few people at that high level that they were able to pass your name around and get you over to the University of Chicago?
Yeah, well, when you get into like some of this really high level math, there's crazy stuff that goes on. You end up doing proofs with things like proving that if you have a sphere of gold this size, you can actually break it into 4 pieces and reconnect it into a sphere twice the size, things that don't even make sense in physics and so on. And if you can grok that stuff, I guess you get people's attention. But, it's amazing because at that time, AI was a long way away. I mean, we're sitting there. So I'm talking about, for graduate school, this is 1991 to 1996, 92 to 96. And I built a robot. My PhD was on attention, essentially figuring out what parts of a scene are worth spending processing power from a visual processing perspective. And Carnegie Mellon was doing some cool stuff with a self-driving car that was crashing into stop signs and things. And I was like, this is a long way away. And as I finished up my PhD, started doing some consulting. Next thing I know, we got a contract from IBM, loaded up the van, moved to New York just to be in their backyard, and started up a software company. And what's happened in the last 2 years in AI is beyond my expectations. I did not think that we would be where we are today. And I have to say that so now I've got very high expectations where we're going. And I still believe that I'll probably be blown away, and that what's going to happen 5 years from now is going to be even beyond my already high expectations. We as humans cannot fully appreciate exponential growth. It's just something that is outside of our experience. And even if you anticipate it and you can look at a curve and see how fast it grows and all this stuff, you can't feel it in your heart. And that is what's going to happen in AI, and it's going to blow us all away. And people talk about AI, sort of, we're at the platform and the AI train's going to come up and we're going to jump on and go for a ride. It's going to fly right past us. We're like, what was that? It's going to be a fun decade, scary decade too.
So last question I have about AI real quick in your studies is, back in the day, did you think that it was more of like a software constraint? Did you think it was a hardware constraint where it just wasn't physically possible to have enough chips to get it done? Or what was kind of the consensus back then?
Looks like, and we're using this word AI. AI is a very broad field, and what's happened with large language models is a tiny part of this broader field. But it's interesting, and neural nets are interesting and a little bit broader. But it looks like what's happened most recently was a hardware constraint, and someone just had to have enough guts and enough charisma to get the money to really load up a giant neural net. And but you can't have intelligence without information. And the fact that we were able to put so much information readily accessible on the internet did create a path for doing serious training with serious hardware. Neural nets have been around for a long time, and these guys over at Google came up with the transformer, which is just one of many different models and topologies that can be used for a neural net. I think that that for large language models, it was just a constraint in terms of our ability to put that much hardware to work and have access to that much data. That said, there are algorithms, there are holes in the LLM algorithm and neural nets in general. And there needs to be just fundamental innovation that is that may take a long time, but we can go a long way with what we have now.
So with you working on something so theoretical back in the 90s, it could have been very easy for you to be lost into academia forever.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about how you quickly transitioned from in academia to now all of a sudden you're on a phone call with IBM and heading out to New York.
Yeah. Well, it's a personality thing. A lot of people could have been lost in academia forever. Probably not me. I like theoretical work. I like solving very complicated theoretical problems. But my personality was a little bit more extroverted and practical. Even my thesis was, on attention. It's really about, okay, you can't have attention without intention. What is your intention? You're going to have a plan, and that's going to restrict what is relevant. And you have to find out what's useful, and then you spend your processing power on that. Same kind of mindset I have. Okay, well, what's actually useful right now for these tasks? And that leads you into more of a business career than purely an academic one. I've never been someone who's motivated by money or near-term money. That's not what I jump up out of bed in the morning. But I am motivated by by not letting people down and having expectations, and just kind of always sort of just feel it's like, oh, I got to get, I got to do it right for this person. And that is a great way to end up in the business world, where you're constantly driven to fulfill an expectation, to solve a problem for someone else. My mind just right now goes to sort of Ayn Rand and selfishness versus selflessness, and she might say, okay, well, you're selfless, and that makes you not a true capitalist. But I think that the constructive capitalism happens from that selfless kind of like, I just want to fulfill expectations for other people.
Awesome. No, I feel you with that. So what came kind of first? Did the business model for FatWire come first, or did the IBM contract come first?
IBM contract came first. And I think that if I were to suddenly teleport into a university and teach entrepreneurship, as opposed to other forms of business, but entrepreneurship, I would start the class with contract comes first. First, find a customer that needs something that you can do. And then eventually you'll see a pattern after you win more and more customers in a consultative way as to things that are commonly needed in the market that you're uniquely qualified to fulfill. And that will turn into a product, and a company will result from that. But I think that it would be an incredible stroke of luck to just wake up one morning with a product idea, and coincidentally, everyone in the world needs it, and you're an amazing success. I think it should start the other way 99.9% of the time.
Again, I couldn't agree more. For my business, we signed like our first 3 clients before we had a website, right? And then from there, you're everything to everyone, then everything to someone, then something to someone, as you slowly figure out your business model and what customers you like working with and which ones you don't. So I'm in total agreement with you.
Here's a data point. When you take a look at company names, my first company, FatWire, I had no idea what I was going to do, or I wouldn't have named it FatWire, right? Apple. What was going through their heads, right? Now, Microsoft has a name that's consistent with, what they do, and that's amazing. But, Oracle, okay, IBM again, like Microsoft, but 99% of the names out there are like, okay, those guys were winging it, and then they came out to something.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's just a thing of the times, where you look at businesses from like the 1920s, they're called Minnesota Railway Company, because they had to have a specific game plan and go to the bank with that, where nowadays it's just a few kids experimenting, trying to figure out different business models, so they have to pick kind of a ambiguous name from the start because they don't even know what they want.
I think that is true, and I think that's one of the great things that you see in American culture is that we have really since the probably 80s and 90s embraced creativity in business to a point where it's like, okay, great, keep all options open in your mind. Don't lock yourself in on day one to Minnesota Rail Company, and that's never going to turn into an amazing ice cream company. But Apple could have been an ice cream company. Who knows what those guys were doing in the garage on day one?
No, exactly. So do you mind tell me kind of your initial innovation at FatWire and what FatWire did?
Oh, sure. So, all right. So we started off, actually, the first customer was not IBM. It was Motorola. We were in Chicago, at University of Chicago, another guy, Mark Fasciano, and I. And we met some people over at Chicago that were trying to build an intranet of, it wasn't really called an intranet at the time, but they had a bunch of help manuals that they needed to put online and access. And this is probably 1995. Alta Vista was the search engine, and not even Netscape at the time, Mozilla. And so we started doing something for them, probably writing all of the code in Perl, which is an unintelligible language after the fact, unmaintainable, but everybody was playing around with that. And then we were introduced to an advertising agency, Clarion, out of Connecticut, that was doing annual reports for companies, just all the graphics work for them. They introduced us to Pratt & Whitney. So out of the gate, we were very lucky. Motorola, Pratt & Whitney, and then we turned that annual report to a set of web pages, and then we they introduced us to IBM to create something for their annual report. That didn't go anywhere, but they needed to publish press releases. And that resulted in us manually coding up a couple of press releases in HTML, and then being computer scientists, way overqualified for turning a press release that doesn't even have an image in it into HTML, and to saying, all right, well, let's automate this. So we wrote something called the update engine that allowed them to publish their own press releases. And then we took over IBM Global Services website and allowed them to do that. So it was really that company in particular had a need that they were writing press releases and publishing pages on the website every day. And we took the humans out of the loop and allowed their marketing communication teams to do that directly. And then that was really one of the first applications in the MarTech, the marketing technology space, is to get IT out of the way so that marketing could manage their own online information. And a lot of the stuff that's happened since then in MarTech have been about do it yourself, or making the marketing team self-sufficient and not rely on an IT team that's going to slow them down.
As I was looking through your history and reading your bio and such, for nerds like me, you're almost like our version of like Forrest Gump. Of just you're at the perfect place, you're at AI early, and you're there trying to explain to people before that's there, and then next thing you're into like internet marketing, and you're there from literally, like you said, from Netscape all the way to like the invention of the iPhone. How, as an agency owner for the last 8 years, it's been easy because my platform has stayed the same. How did you possibly stay on top of all the different changes from like a video being embedded into a browser to and now being on your phone? And how do you even keep up with that stuff on a daily basis?
That's really interesting because it reminds me of something that, all right, so the technology's evolved. I've always cared a lot about what I call maintainability in code bases, that you can hand a piece of code to another team member and they can maintain it and so forth. And in that first application, Update Engine, we created a programming language called Fuel, FatWire Update Engine Language, FUEL. And that was the language for creating dynamic web pages. And it turned out that the syntax for Fuel was almost equivalent to the first really useful server-side language like that called JSP, Java Server Pages. Almost identical syntax, except JSP started their lines with less than exclamation point, and we started ours with less than Fuel, but almost the same thought process. And one day I was taking a look at JSP, and I'm like, okay, this stuff is starting to work. We were actually a little bit ahead of them. And I went to the team and I said, all right, everybody, we've got to throw Fuel away, and we're going to switch everything to JSP. It's going to be really easy. They're very similar, so we'll be compatible with both. And a lot of the engineers were like, what? This is our language. We love it. We made it. We were there first. It's like, you know what? The market has spoken. JSP is the way to go. And we're going to do bigger and greater things than get hung up on a language. And a lot of these progressions in technology do require that you let go, because things are changing quickly. And if you get stuck in the mud playing with whatever, C++ when Java and the next language came out, or some other technology, and you're hung up on relational databases when no SQL databases are really useful for a particular application, then you're not going to make progress. So somehow you've got to be psychotic enough to just throw away your baby when it's adopt another one.
I'm currently in the middle of a book about the history of PayPal, and they're currently moving over their code base, and all the engineers are freaking out. And of course, the person who wants to move on and get to the future the fastest is Elon, is the CEO at the time. And engineers are mad enough they got him kicked out and fired. So I could definitely imagine the tension back as you were constantly having to be like, nope, everyone start over again. Nope, everyone start over again, like every 2 to 3 years at least.
And it's easy to, kind of say it, but you have to think about which seat you're in. So if you're in the seat of the engineer who's not interacting with customers in the market as much as he is sort of, trying to create that sustainable and code base that is bug free and can grow and so forth. He's got a different perspective, so I can't necessarily fault him, but that's where also you've got to trust the people that are in different seats in the organization to make the decisions from their perspective, and everyone's not going to always be right. And from the seat of a CEO, as you're looking at sort of, bigger strategies, we're going to do some acquisitions. We're going to launch a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign and take over a niche market that is under service and so forth. And this will fund lots of interesting innovation for the people that are in the other seats. That is how you're able to say, okay, fuel versus JSP, jump on the JSP train. We're going to go take over some other market rather than be the king of the server-side programming language.
Okay, my last question before we get into Bridgeline. How did you feel after the big Oracle acquisition? Were you remorseful? Were you excited? Were you happy? Where were you on the spectrum? And did it change like 2 weeks afterwards? Did you have some remorse, or how did you feel?
Elated. I think that that was a perfect time for that organization to move on. The space that FatWire was in, the web content management space itself, had a systemic problem, which is that customer acquisition costs for platforms, and web content management is a platform, is fundamentally so high that it can take well more than 2 years to recoup the costs of customer acquisition. That's fine if you're a major and you have the ability to look 6-7 years down the road and to charge an extreme premium for your product. But if you're a smaller company, it's very difficult. Now, Shopify came after FatWire, and Shopify pulled it off, and they did it in a very innovative way, which is that they were able to recognize the ability to essentially have credit card processing fees, which funded a tremendous amount of sales and marketing capabilities. But for FatWire, we didn't see that, and it was going to become very expensive to push it to the next level. And that's one of the things that when I first saw Bridgeline, I saw as a problem with a solution that I knew about that we would approach.
So yeah, let's get into that. I heard you say in a different interview that you're at some financial conference and you kind of elbow the guy next to you during a Bridgeline presentation saying, hey, I think I could actually do that a little bit better than them. First off, what kind of conferences are these that has that kind of audience? And second off, how long did it kind of take from you nudging a person saying I could do that better to you're sitting there in the CEO chair?
Okay, cool. I'll tell that story. So the microcap space has very intimate conferences. It's a very small, a very small community of analysts, of investors, of CEOs. A lot of people know each other, and I'm not just talking about microcap technology. Microcap in general, and especially nano cap. If we're talking about companies that have sub $100 million market caps or sub $50 million market caps, then everyone knows each other. And so after I sold FatWire, I took some time. I went down to Belize, and bottle of tequila later, I owned 7 miles of oceanfront. I was developing whole communities. It was great. I did that for 10 years. And along the way, had invested in some companies and invested in a company that I'm still on the board with called Intellinetics. It's on the New York Stock Exchange. And I was at the Taglish Brothers conference looking for Intellinetics. Bridgeline shows up. And at that time, Bridgeline had an identity crisis. It was a roll-up of digital agencies that had acquired agency that happened to have created its own web content management. And I recognized 2 things. One is I think web content management in 1996, this is 2 decades later, a little bit late to enter that market unless you really got something special. And 2, the competition is going to be brutal. And unless you have very deep pockets, it's going to be difficult to outmarket those guys. So I leaned over to the guy next to me and said, yeah, I've seen these problems before. I could fix that company. It's not going to be easy, but I could fix it. And I went home and I slept like a baby, didn't think anything about it. And then the phone started ringing. Ari, get involved, get involved, get involved. So I invested some money. I put like $250,000 in and tried to do some consulting work, and realized that just fundamentally you needed a complete cultural shift. So I brought in a couple $1 million, invested a little bit more, and brought in some other people, and came in as the CEO to fully transform the company, because it required two transformations. The first one was that Bridgeline was a roll-up of digital agencies that had started trying to shift towards being a software company. Digital agencies at that scale are not a great entity to be on public markets in the first place. And they have lower margins, and they have a lot of stuff that just shouldn't be in the light of day, and so on. And then second of all, the technology that they moved towards was the wrong technology and needed to be rethought. So it took a while, and I think that we're on the right path now. We still have a ways to go, but the path that we moved towards was instead of competing with digital agencies and platforms, which is a death sentence for a small company, partner with the agency, partner with the platform, and release apps that can sit on top of platforms, add value to those platforms, encourage them to bring leads to you, reduce those customer acquisition costs, and take advantage of the fact that marketing technology is so overpopulated and has this huge cash flow trough that is fundamental to the SaaS business model in the first place, that you've got a giant number of companies that have no access to capital, great ideas, growing pains. Why not bring those things together, take advantage of their independent customer bases to cross-sell through them, and build a larger business that can be partners with everybody instead of fighting with everyone?
So yeah, if I have this right, pre you joining on the company, on board the company, they had kind of a more buy versus build model. And your idea was maybe more, let's build these software tools on top of the different winners, and let's kind of ride the wave opposed to trying to compete with it and kind of die of 1,000 cuts? Or is that kind of what your main overarching strategy was? Is that, hey, the big players have already won, let's just help people win more?
To a certain extent, right? And to be more specific, so marketing technology has a few platforms upon which everything else sits. CRMs, because what Salesforce has accomplished, has become one of those platforms, which normally wouldn't be a platform. Web content management is. And those platforms have entrenched customers, very hard to leave a platform once you're already on it, but they have the need to constantly innovate. They don't have the ability to constantly innovate. They're not quite big enough to do that. So what they have done is they've created marketplaces, just like the iPhone marketplace, that, the App Store, where lots of contributors can create small bells and whistles to make that platform even better, just like the little apps that you put on your iPhone make the iPhone more useful. And rolling those apps up is hugely valuable. It allows you to innovate quickly. You can create new apps, and it allows you to be best friends with the platform rather than trying to displace them.
So in a perfect world, in your board meeting where you say, hey, this is the perfect Bridgeline customer, and we'd acquire them by buying this software from us or getting this software for free from us, and then they would transition to this one, and then they would transition to this offering we have. What is that ideal client, and what is that roadmap they would take?
Yeah. Well, we look at the market in terms of what we call micro segments, and we have what we call be everywhere campaigns in those micro segments. So we go into subsegments like not just distributors, not first of all, not just B2B. That's too broad. That's everything. Not just B2B distributors. Okay, that's narrower, but that's still relatively broad. We look at B2B electrical distributors as an example, where we want to win enough B2B electrical distributors that we are the I don't know, call it an 800-pound gorilla in the space, even though it's a narrow space. We have great references. We know how to speak their language, and then we can be everywhere in our marketing and win the rest of them. We go after multiple segments simultaneously. But as an example, credit unions call their customers members. Banks call their customers clients. And when you speak with a credit union, if you use the word member, you get a certain amount of extra attention than if you put your foot in your mouth and call them clients. So we learn how to speak those languages. And then what we also are able to do is to roll up success, not just success stories, but even databases that work for customers in a micro segment and productize those so that out of the box for the next customer, we're solving more problems immediately. And that's very difficult to do in the broader market. But when you really get specific, you can pull that off, especially in marketing technology. And that allows you to just add more value out of the box. It reduces your sales cycle, which is a big deal. You want a short sales cycle. The micro segments allows you to more focus your marketing dollars. Another big deal. You've got to spend less money for each customer win. And that's basically our strategy.
When it sounds also like the great relationship you have within these kind of mini categories that they almost do like the R&D for you too.
Yes, big time. In fact, that happened in a big way just recently, where a customer of ours had a huge repository of, this is an electrical distributor, huge repository of legacy spec sheets for their products that they considered to be proprietary information. They did not want it in public. This was a competitive advantage. But when someone is searching for an electrical component on their site, they wanted that intelligence to somehow drive that search. And they were hiring all of these engineers from Vietnam for like the last 10 years to start looking for keywords in these documents. And they're doing this offshore stuff and adding keywords to their search. And it was a never-ending process. Well, we were able to leverage large language models to automatically ingest all of those PDF files, millions of them, understand each of those products in a more intimate way, automatically improve the search results while keeping all of that information still proprietary in the back office, but taking the intelligence and putting the intelligence on the outside. Huge innovation for us. We were able to productize that, bring it to all of our other customers. You got, marketing material, whatever. We can understand that and improve your search results. And that's just one example. And that happened just a couple of months ago, in fact, maybe 6 months ago, of your customer driving innovation. And that goes right back to where we started this conversation, is that 99.9% of the time, the market will tell you what to do. Don't try to tell the market what to do.
So you kind of got into my next question of with the recent release of Smart Search and Rapid UI. They seem to be going really well. How much of that is because of your AI background that you were able to jump on this trend that much faster than everyone else?
Well, that is certainly helpful. Fundamentally, when it comes to large language models, OpenAI and competitive companies have done a great job at creating APIs that allow anyone to innovate on top of that infrastructure. And Hugging Face has done a good job of publishing all of those APIs and making them accessible in a marketplace type model. What we're good at, and I'm helpful in this, but we've got a lot of great AI people inside of the company, is to understand the real world application for those capabilities. It would require billions of dollars and millions of man years to build a really smart LLM like OpenAI did. They spent a lot of money doing that. But the fact that we can use it there's a million ways to use it that are worthless and don't help anyone, but to understand those customer needs, to find those patterns, and then to also understand how to use this new technology and deploy it in a way that is helpful is something that we're good at. I like to think that I'm, with my background, helping to drive that. We've got other AI experts, John Murcott in particular, who is our VP of product management, that are doing most of the hands-on work there and having a culture that is focused on real world customer needs first and foremost, and then our unique knowledge of the technology to apply that to solve those real needs is what drives the business as opposed to technology for technology's sake.
And because I noticed that you're spending less year over year on sales and marketing, but spending more year over year on research and development. Is that partially due to the kind of AI push and making sure that you are servicing and helping out your customers in every way possible now that there's kind of a new way to look at it?
Yeah, we did ramp up our R&D spend specifically for AI. So our year over year R&D spend, I don't know off the top of my head, it's probably up 25% though. And that is all around AI. We think that there is a window of time right now when the technology is mature enough to solve real world problems. We think that we understand specific problems that we can solve and don't want to let those problems remain unsolved for too long and have someone else do it instead of us. So we're making the investment today to get ahead of the market on those solutions. And then we're finding others. We have a huge roadmap with a million different things that we'd love to be able to do. And one of the big challenges right now is to decide what to do first, because there's a lot of capabilities that have suddenly matured. It's really an exciting time.
Oh yeah, for sure. As someone who works with many distributors and knows how big their catalogs are and how complicated it all is, to have someone like you in their corner to help them out and grok through all that and figure it all out and see what's relevant and what's not is going to be literally like save these companies in the 21st century. So I would say kudos to you on that front.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that's all I have for today. I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where they can learn more about your business and see if they'd be a good customer or see if you have a solution for them.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So Bridgeline.com is our company, and HawkSearch is our number one product, and HawkSearch.com will show you how we can help you increase the conversion on your website, help your customers find the products that they want to buy, and to be able to understand your customer base even better and automatically bring that information into your own catalog. So take a look at HawkSearch.com.
I will include the links in the description below. So thank you for those who are still listening. Please remember to subscribe and review, and I'll see you all next time.
Thank you, Will.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not provide financial, legal, or any other advice. The information is not investment advice or any offer to buy or sell any securities or to make any investment. The views expressed by the guests are their own, and any reference to third-party products, services, or information does not constitute an endorsement therefore by NanoCap Podcast or its affiliates. The NanoCap Podcast express disclaims all liability for any individual's use of the information